Okay, good morning from London in the United Kingdom. Well, what am I doing here? I'm going to see an MP for the first time in my life, Peter Aldous. He's the MP for Suffolk, a place called Waveney in Suffolk in East England. And I'm here in London to go off to Portkillis House, which is in the Palace of Westminster, where the Houses of Parliament are. So I'm here representing Heads Up CIO and to talk to Peter Aldous about Heads Up and about our National Resilience Programme for Stress and Trauma. So why don't you join me on the journey and see how this happens? It's a bit quite exciting for me, I suppose, because it's the first time I've ever been to anywhere near the Houses of Parliament, and certainly not to speak to a Member of Parliament. So let's see if I can get there, see where I am. So let's see if I can just get a taxi. So here we are. Taxi's just stopped. Hello there, yeah, I'm going to Portkillis House. Yeah, is that alright?
Yeah, of course it is.
Right, thanks a lot. I'm broadcasting on Facebook Live, just so you know.
That's no problem.
Alright, thanks a lot. Okay, so, got a taxi at least. So here we are. I think it's just a few minutes ride from Victoria Station. It's taken me kind of come halfway across the world to get here. This meeting obviously was booked a while back, but as a casualty of Monarch, I didn't manage to make it out to Israel when I planned, and I had a very important meeting to get to yesterday morning. So Sunday evening I flew from Manchester to Zurich and got a connection from Zurich to Tel Aviv on Monday morning. And by Monday evening I was in the airport again, flying from Tel Aviv to Manchester, which got in there early hours of this morning, and transferred to a bus to London and arrived here at 8 o'clock this morning. So if I'm looking a little bit rough, you can understand why, and hopefully you'll forgive me. Okay, so we're off to a very important meeting. Representing Heads Up, first time that I've ever met a Member of Parliament or been anywhere near the Houses of Parliament, and certainly the first time doing this representing charity Heads Up. So, what is on the agenda? Well, first of all I want to explain, first of all Peter, the Member of Parliament, Peter Aldous, contacted me first. He wrote me a letter following the work we did in the Manchester bombing and the London Bridge terror attack and Grenfell fire. He wrote to me thanking me and all the work that Heads Up and everybody, all the volunteers that work in Heads Up had done in training volunteers on how to do cognitive psychological first aid, in the work that we did in Manchester and twice in London. And I wrote back, of course, and thanked him for his kind words. He wrote to me because his constituents in Waveney in Suffolk had asked him and told him about our work and asked him to contact me. So I wrote back to him, and thanks Boyd Morwood for your best wishes, and Catherine Glenister too, and Boaz, thank you for tuning in. So basically I wrote back to him and I said thank you very much for writing to me. Now I didn't realise that in the United Kingdom only people in the constituency, if I've got this right, only people in the constituency of an MP can actually write to an MP. So it was a big privilege for me to be able to write back to an MP who's not in my constituency, and I understood that this was possible because he'd written to me first. So as it happens, he was one of 45 members of the British Parliament across the board that have written to me as a representative of Heads Up. So I feel very privileged about that. And it's all down to our volunteers and the wonderful work they did following these critical incidents. So anyway, so I wrote back to him and I said, look, why don't we meet up if possible, and I can explain to you a little bit more about the charity Heads Up and what our objectives are and what we want to do and so on. So here we are. He replied and said, yep, would like to meet you, and today's the day. Okay, so what are my plans and what is the, what's the agenda for today as far as Heads Up is concerned? So basically, and if you've got any ideas, you can write them in the comments as we speak. But basically, my first objective is just, again, to go over with Peter Aldous about what Heads Up is doing and what its plans are regarding our National Resilience programme. Now, basically, our first objective is to get as many people in the United Kingdom trained in cognitive psychological first aid. Cognitive psychological first aid is a very simple kind of CPR for the brain, if you like. So every member of the public can learn this. It doesn't take long. It's a course of maybe half a day. And then once you've been through the course, you are able to apply cognitive psychological first aid to anyone around you who might go into psychological shock following whatever event that has happened. And that can be a terrorist attack, but it can also be a car accident, or it can also be fire or any other accident or crime or whatever has happened, whatever incident has happened that a person is involved in and goes into psychological shock. Now, traditionally what happens when somebody goes into psychological shock is that they're left at the side until somebody comes to attend to them. And if they're on the scene of an accident or a crime or some sort of attack, then they might be taken to hospital and looked at by a doctor and maybe sent home. And if they continue to feel unwell from a psychological trauma point of view, then within a few weeks the doctor will maybe see them. If you learn cognitive psychological first aid, first of all, you can be treated on an immediate basis, actually on the scene. If somebody knows how to apply it, they can come over to you, to your colleague, if you're a first responder or a member of public, and administer psychological first aid, which would take between 1 and 2 minutes, and bring a person out of psychological shock. And this in itself can bring somebody back to full functioning ability, which will help them from the point of view of safety, and that would help them get out of further danger that they might be in the arena that they happen to find themselves. And if they're a first responder or a professional in the emergency services, and they too are very vulnerable to go into psychological shock, their colleague could administer this very, very simple protocol like CPR for the brain. Once you've learnt it, it's very easy to apply, and their colleague can come out of psychological shock and go back into action, and so manage to help more people. So it's good for professionals, it's good for first responders and the emergency team, and it's also good for members of public. And if it's available, then why shouldn't everybody learn how to do that? Whether you're in schools, or whether you're in arenas, or whether you're in houses of parliament, or wherever you are that is vulnerable for attacks, vulnerable for accidents, vulnerable for situations where people might go, large populations in buildings and in skyscrapers, where people can go into panic and shock. I mean, if we look at Las Vegas, which has happened the other week there, 55 or so people were killed, but a lot of people were injured through panic. And this is what we find in these scenes of crime and terror, that a lot of people around are injured psychologically by panic. And, a lot of people can be killed actually because everybody's going into panic, and there's kind of a herd attitude. And some people are left behind, and some people collapse on the ground because they're in some sort of psychological shock. So if there's somebody around, and who can be around but your friend or your family or your neighbour or whoever it is that you're with, having learned cognitive psychological first aid, can administer this very, very quick protocol and help their friend get out of a situation which would be very difficult when you're in shock. So if this is very easy to learn, and even school children can learn it, and I recommend that school children learn it, then why not? And Heads Up's first, let's say, educational objective is to try and teach as many people in the country as possible. So that's probably one of the first things that I want to talk to Peter Aldous about when I meet him today. The next thing is to tell him about our emergency response service, and that is what we started with. And basically we have trained volunteers, and we want to continue to train volunteers in every city. So every city in the United Kingdom will have a team that's ready to respond in a mass casualty incident, a terror attack, or a mass flooding, or some other incident where there's a lot of casualties and there's going to be psychotrauma, and people are going to be casualties of trauma. That these trained people can go into action and be able to open up a pop-up clinic, trauma clinic, and be able to know how the logistics are worked out, and be able to treat these people on an immediate basis. It's not psychotherapy, and it's not debriefing, and it's all according to nice guidelines, and it's, everything is about basically a neurological triggering of the prefrontal cortex, of the thinking part of the brain, which is just behind your forehead. After you've been in psychological shock, which is a kind of a hijacking by the emotional brain. It can be, there's something that can be done, and if something can be done to help people, why shouldn't we learn it? Now this evidence and this experience is being basically imported from Israel, which is for years have had to put up with all sorts of terrorist attacks and mass casualty incidents of one sort and another, whether it's through war or whether it's through terror or whatever. And they've learned over the last 70 years how to deal with this. And so my objective was to bring that richness of information and evidence-based experience and bring it over to the United Kingdom and indeed Europe or anywhere else in the world, and actually teach the population how to deal with these incidents. Now, as a byproduct of learning how to deal with acute stress and under traumatic situations is that you learn about how to deal with your own mental health. And so why not use that also as an opportunity in teaching people how to deal and cope with everyday stress? Because if you know how to deal with acute stress, then you can understand how the mind is working, how your body's working, how they work in unison, and so on and so forth. And so you can manage to educate the population at the same time on how to deal with these inner events that happen that can be very fearful and very scary and cause all sorts of mental uncomfortable situations and maybe lead to more chronic disorders later on. And if you can manage to catch it and prevent it early by teaching psychoeducation, but also teaching techniques on how to deal with this, then why not? Alright, so these are basically the three things that I think I'm going to put to Peter Aldous. Of course, the charity has very little funding at the moment, and as all charities do, but we have zero funding. I mean, we've done everything that we've done so far with basically no cash down. We've received a lot of support and a lot of donations of people's time, of people's experiences, of people's property, products that companies have donated towards us and things like that. But from the point of view of cash, we're a zero cash charity. We've had no income whatsoever. So I would like to also talk to a member of Parliament about, maybe his direction on, how we can acquire for ourselves, secure for ourselves funding in order to continue to go out and give this message of being safe in an unsafe environment. I'd like to offer Peter Aldous in his own constituency free training for his first responders and emergency staff in his constituency. So we'll see if what happens there. Okay, so I think we've just arrived. Is this it?
Here we are, sir.
Okay, thank you. So just give me a second and we'll see what happens. So how much is that, please?
£10.40, please.
Right.
You need a receipt?
Yes, please. That's
Thank you, sir.
Alright, so that's thank you. Where is it?
Right in front of you.
Is that it? Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Okay, so here I am. This is the Houses of Parliament behind me. This is Portkillis House, which is like where the members of Parliament meet, their offices, I suppose. There's where we are. There's Big Ben under repair. It's going to be not chiming for a few years, I think, while they clean it up and service the clock. Not been for a long time. Here is the Houses of Parliament Palace. St Thomas's Hospital over there, and we have also the big wheel, big London Eye as it's called. I'll just try and show you here, which was put up originally for the Millennium celebrations, and it stayed in London, and so there you go. It's the London Eye. So I'm here 15 minutes early, so I'm going to just prepare myself and go into the Portkillis house. So I will leave you just now and catch you again when I get out. So thanks James for your good wishes, and you too, Melanie, and hopefully I'll see you soon with good news. Alright, bye for now. Hi Gabriel.